can. Hope you can.
Yes, sorry, I went on mute right away.
No problem. So I would like to tell you all a cautionary tale about what can happen when a pipeline runs through your community. We heard very powerful testimony about what happens during the process of approval and construction of these pipelines, but it doesn't stop there. So I'd like to tell you about the Cricket Valley Energy Center, which is New York's newest and largest fracked gas electric power plant, which is located in Dover, New York, very close to where I live. The Cricket Valley Energy Center was proposed in 2009 and was approved in 2012 by New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. It consumes natural gas delivered via the Iroquois pipeline. In fact, proximity to the Iroquois was one of the factors that weighed very heavily in the siting decisions for this project. Siting and approval for the plant wasn't without controversy, but the Cricket Valley developers were very stealthy, and hardly anyone in the surrounding communities was really aware of what was planned until construction started in 2017. CVE, which is an acronym for Cricket Valley Energy, promised the residents of the town of Dover, where the project was sited, hundreds of well-paying jobs. They did an excellent job of dividing the community. On the one side, we had residents who were hungry for economic opportunity. On the other side, those who were worried about the health of their families and on the health of their overall community. Cricket Valley's 6 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions each year put New York State on a backward slide when the state's official policy is to have a carbon-free electric sector by 2040. It's obvious that the politicians are hoping that we won't notice this hypocrisy. The 6 million ton number is really a conservative value. The methane that will leak from the Iroquois pipeline because of this project, the additional demand, that's about 3% of the total natural gas that runs through the pipeline, is considered to be 85% worse than CO2 in terms of its global heating potential over a 20-year period. So that's something that's really critical to consider when you think about these pipelines. It's not just that the gas is going to be burned and produce CO2 that will cause global warming, but the gas itself is 85 times worse than CO2 when it leaks. So when we hear stories about a gasket blowing out and thousands of cubic feet of gas being released into the atmosphere, multiply that by 85, and that's how much you would have in CO2 equivalent. Anyway, it's amazing to me, but I still run into people in town who claim that the plant isn't run on fracked gas. The company that built CVE did a great job of greenwashing, and people still believe that. They told the community that the gas powering the plant would be clean and green and not fracked, but the truth is that just about every methane molecule that runs through this pipeline is indeed from fracking wells. Here's an overview of the communities surrounding CVE. As I mentioned, Dover, New York is where CVE is sited. It's a beautiful wooded valley called the Harlem Valley. And the Chattahoochee indigenous community has their home just to the east of the plant, and 5 multi-generational family farms and a growing number of new organic farms dot the landscape in the area. And there are 3 schools in the immediate vicinity of this plant. And when I say immediate, I mean within a couple of miles. Dover is an economically disadvantaged community. In fact, it's the poorest rural town in Dutchess County, bringing all of the health and other environmental justice issues to the front in our fight against Cricket Valley. And sadly, this is almost always the case. Threatened communities are selected as targets for dirty projects, and the project promoters promise economic benefits that never show up. Cricket Valley's developers receive tax advantages in exchange for the jobs that they promise the community. CVE gives $20,000 a year to the high school that I mentioned, and this effectively silenced any objection from those whose jobs it is to protect their children. I really doubt that the $20,000 would pay for the asthma inhalers that the school kids are likely to need now that the plant is in operation. And I mentioned hundreds of jobs. Well, they were almost all out-of-state workers working for Bechtel and other huge contractors. The few jobs that did appear were for low-paying, unskilled positions. Here's a slide of the worker parking lot. As you can see, there's not a New York State plate in sight. Cricket Valley borders on one of the largest freshwater wetlands in the state, called the Great Swamp. This vast and fragile wetland is a unique habitat for diverse wildlife, including rare and endangered animals and plant species. And the Great Swamp helps humans as well. It filters water, recharges the aquifer, particularly the one that serves New York City, provides flood control, and feeds, as I said, New York City's drinking water system. As the global extinction crisis looms, Cricket Valley is threatening yet another habitat, which is already under stress from global heating. The Great Swamp and all the creatures that live in it are unlikely to survive the onslaught from their neighbor. Bill McKibben, founder of 350.org and one of the top authorities in the climate fight, had this to say about Cricket Valley. If ever there was a bad plan, this was it. Bill's referring to the greenwash that CVE's owners use to liberally promote the idea that fracked methane gas is cleaner than the alternatives and should be considered as a bridge fuel. It's not cleaner just because the smoke isn't black, and as Bill said, it's a bridge to nowhere. When the plant was permitted in 2012, New York's Department of Environmental Conservation allowed CVE to estimate its greenhouse emissions based on the 100-year global warming impact of methane. But as I mentioned, the 20-year value is 86 times worse. Today, they wouldn't have been allowed to do that. And in a lawsuit that was filed in 2019 demanding that DEC review the plant's application using up-to-date science, which was unfortunately dismissed in part because the plant was already under construction. So the lesson here for those who are fighting pipelines and gas infrastructure is not to wait too long when you're fighting the fossil fuel industry. And also that pipelines are not something that transports gas just through your town. They also attract opportunists looking for ways to burn that gas and generate profits with all the environmental destruction that follows. The fight against Cricket Valley began in earnest in 2017, the year that construction began. Once the structure of the plant began to rise from the valley floor, local residents and environmental activists ramped up for the fight. The construction companies and the owners of Cricket Valley knew that they were in a race to complete the plant before our voices reached those in power. We knew that Governor Cuomo had the power to stop the plant if the pressure was high enough, and that was our goal, to ramp up the pressure. In January of 2019, local farmers blocked the road in protest to stop materials from being delivered to the under construction plant. 3 of them were arrested by state police. And last November, 4 protesters climbed the top of CVE's almost completed smokestacks and occupied this space for 12 freezing cold hours, shutting plant construction down for the day. They too were jailed. And when the plant fired up in January 2020, the noise and smell from the 3 new turbines shocked even those who thought the plant would provide a benefit to the community. Several homeowners are suing the plant right now, and others have moved from the area. So this is where we stand right now. The plant is operating and the community is suffering. This is the legacy of the Iroquois pipeline in the place that I call home. When the pipeline projects are approved, the result is much like expanding a traffic-prone 6-lane highway. More cars always appear and the traffic always returns no matter how large you make the highway. And similarly, demands for gas will always expand to meet the available supply. Eventually, we have to stop and consider the harm that extracting, transporting, and burning all of this gas causes. The project that you'll be hearing about next is one that can be stopped now. And I hope that we can make FERC understand that their job is about more than guaranteeing profits and money to pipeline companies.